coming in.
It's a pleasure.
For the chat and find out how you got to where you are. So the first question, when did you hear the term facilities management, and first hear, and in what context?
I was working as group administration manager for a publishing company called Longman, and I think I first came across the title because we were working with DGW, who were producing a magazine then called Facilities, and that was where I first came across it. So that would have been early 80s, 84-ish, something like that. Can't remember the date, age.
There you go, journalists.
Yes.
And so what were you involved with when you first heard it? So obviously you were the
group admin manager was actually a true facilities job, in my view. Still is a true facilities job, if the job still exists, in that it didn't only include the building maintenance and the running of the estate, but it also included all the property elements. So all the rent rates, lease reviews, all those kinds of things were also part of the role, as well as things like fleet management. And it was such a long time ago. I even had an in-house catering team and a in-house maintenance team and a telephone exchange with wires that crossed. So things have changed.
My mum used to do that.
Oh, there you go.
So that was your first facilities job.
Yeah, and that's when I first heard the word,
yeah.
And it struck me that it absolutely described it, but then of course we ended up spending several years fighting for the right vet to use it, which I think we've more or less got done now.
Excellent, excellent. So what were you doing before you became involved with what we call facilities management, and how did you get that move into that role?
I was in HR, or originally in personnel management, then of course it changed its name, so I was in HR. Rebranding, yeah. And I wanted to have more credibility as an HR manager by having done a line management role. And my then bosses thought that it would be a good development for me to do a line management role. So I was offered a choice of either the group administration manager job or shipping manager, I think was the other alternative. And I chose the group administration manager job because it gave me such a large workforce. I think I had a staff then of about 120. And I wanted to do the line management because it seemed to me in HR you spend a lot of your time nagging managers about what they're supposed to do and getting their PDRs in time, etc. And actually with a very small staff of 2 that wasn't difficult for me, but with 120 and it was quite different. So that was why I did it initially on a 2-year secondment, and then by the time we'd done a year of it actually, I really decided I didn't want to go back to HR. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it instantly.
Excellent. It is definitely a role that you just fall in love with when you find it.
Yes. So the first role was this group admin manager, and it was just all sorts of everything, and loved it because it got me into everything. But the most interesting thing about it and the key achievement in that period was actually recognising that we needed to have a property strategy. We didn't have a property strategy, and at that time IT was just kicking off in the early 80s. Buildings were beginning to really suffer. We'd moved from telexes and faxes to everybody having PCs, and it was we had a building which was very difficult to adapt. It was a lovely building built in the 60s, but it wouldn't adapt to this, and we had anyway, to cut a long story short, the key achievement in that role was really to formulate, develop and ultimately get buy-in of all parties to a property strategy, which meant a kind of wholesale relocation out of a number of different premises and the sale of that prematurely obsolescent 60s building and the development of a brand new HQ for the company I was then employed by, Longman Group, which we also chose at that time, this is in the 80s, to make it a sustainable development and to make it BREEAM excellent, or as excellent as we could at the time, bearing in mind its size. So that I think was the key achievement in that role. I then left in, I think, 96, at a time when the outsource market had just really opened up and was kicking off. And I joined, and I knew I had some choices at that time. I'd been doing the BIFM chairman's role, so I had some profile, and I chose to move into the supply sector in order to learn about the supply sector and also to contribute in that way. So I joined what was then Chesterton Facility and Property Management, just after they'd taken on the British Gas activity and internal workforce to create Chesterton and FPM, which later became Workplace Management, and spent about 3 years with them. It was a very time of great change for the industry. There was a lot happening. All of us were trying to figure out how you turned these entities into service bodies, and clients were learning too, so it was very new and very difficult. But we did survive. I think we did some good jobs on the contracts that we ran. We created some success out of that. I then moved on to, I suppose, be a bit more independent, to WSP, where I became the managing director of their FM division, which was kind of fledgling. Main achievement there was winning and implementing an innovative contract for providing help desk services to the Royal Mail. And this was 2000, so 99, 2000, round about then. Quite a new contract, 3,500 premises, and we had about 3 months to implement the help desk system, from winning the contract to having to go live on April the 1st, I always recall, which is sort of slightly odd day to go for, but that's when we went live, WSP.
It must be very satisfying to have all these kind of, they're all firsts, and being there right at the front, and sort of having to actually think of things from scratch rather than sort of now where you're innovating what's kind of already there. Yes, although I think you always feel a bit that you're in the vanguard, don't you? Almost wherever you are, it's never quite repeating the past. You're always trying to push the boundaries and do something slightly different. I guess we can learn from the mistakes made before now, whereas then you're right at the forefront.
That's right. Anyway, then after that I left WSP about 2002, and that's when I came out as a consultant. And since then I've been doing consultancy and interim management, which is what I'm still doing now, really. So I'm kind of surprised myself. Greatest learning experience was undoubtedly working in the supply chain. Working both for WSP and for Chesterton were not mistakes, and I would not characterise them as that, but the greatest learning experience in both cases, because suddenly you're in a very different role and relationship to your customers, and I'm still sort of regarding customers as the end users, so you're in a very different space. It's frustrating. I found it frustrating to be in that space, because you can't actually do as much as you're capable of doing and as your team is capable of doing for the client. And I'm still sort of puzzled and saddened sometimes that clients perennially say that it's always down to them, the innovation comes from them, all the pushing comes from them. And I can see that when I'm on a client side, I can understand where they're coming from. But when we're in and sometimes still working with supply side, you know that the capability all exists, and all the potential is there, and it's just really sad that we're not frequently enough getting that coming together.
Yeah. It's the constraint of the negotiation of the contract, or...
I think so. I think that it's partly that, and as things have become more formalised often and procurement departments become involved, and that tends to create some limits accidentally to what people are then able to achieve.
Yeah.
I think it's a great pity. However, on the upside, and I do tend to be optimistic, there are equally some jolly good examples of where people have managed to do great things together, working in partnership with their suppliers, so it's not all bad.
I think, So, what do you consider to be your contribution in both paid work and on a volunteer basis to the development of facilities management as a discipline?
Well, I think that in the 90s, when I really got engaged with it as chairman and things, then I think I did help put it on the map. I'd like to think that was something that people would regard. It wasn't only down to me, far from it, but it coincided with my period of chairmanship, so I think that was a time when we really did begin to reach out to some of the other professional bodies and began to be recognised as somebody that did need to be talked to. That journey is still progressing, and I think everyone who's come after me has made another, and before me actually, has made a step change in that direction. But I think that would be one of the things that I would look back on. And of course it was a time also when for the first time the formal educational qualifications came out, and again, you know, there's been step changes since.
Yeah.
But it was at the inception of some of those times when I happened to coincide with my time of office.